Hi, this is Nadine. I'm one of IMG SOS tutors. Today we're going to discuss how the PESCI exam goes and what constitutes it. So the PESCI consists of two parts. The first part lasts for 1 hour, usually around 5 clinical scenarios. The second part of it lasts around half an hour and usually includes a few interview questions. Some of the questions that you might be asked in this part of the PESCI is tell us about yourself, about your job experience or about your medical experience, whether you've done that overseas or here in Australia. Why did you decide to work here in Australia? They might ask you, are you aware of the recall system and how it works? Can you tell us about that? So the recall system is the software that every general practice clinic has. It helps with recording the patient's names and private details, phone numbers, addresses, the medical records of every visit they come to the clinic, their pathology results, imaging results, and if they've got any investigations that need to be done. For example, if you've done the pap smear today for a 35-year-old lady and you need to make sure that there is a recall for you to invite her for another pap smear in 2 years' time, you can put that on, and then 2 years later it will give you a reminder to send the patient a message or a letter or call her to inform her that she's due for a pap smear. And this goes on for all investigation and other things. Another question that you might get asked is, which practice are you planning to join? And why did you decide to join this practice in particular? What have you done in order to make yourself up to date if you've got a gap in practice? Have you done any courses? Have you been reading any journals, any articles? They might ask you about any examples. It's usually very good to say if you have done the basic life support course or the advanced life support course. It's usually good to say that as well. They will ask you what procedural skills have you done overseas or here in Australia as well. One of the questions that you might get asked, which is really important, is about your supervision and how you will be practicing safely in the clinic. So they will ask you, is your supervisor going to be available at the times when you're practicing? If that's the case, are there other doctors in the clinic? And this question should be answered correlating with the level of supervision that's on the supervised practice plan. And if it doesn't correlate, then you will get an unsatisfactory result of the PESCI, even if you've passed the exam. So it's really important to make sure what level of supervision your supervisor ticked on the supervised practice plan, and to make sure that you mention the same thing in the interview question, as well as that happens in the future when you start practicing. One of the other questions is, what are your career goals? Where can you see yourself 5 years later from now? And the answer for that is just, what's your plans for the next few years? Some other questions might be, what are your weaknesses? What are your strengths that you think you have during your practice? Another question might be, so you haven't got any Australian experience. Are you aware of any difficulties or problems you might face during your practice? And you should tell what difficulties you think you'll be having during the start. If you don't say any difficulty, this actually reflects very poor insight and will worry the panel about your practice. It's good to know your weaknesses, to know where you can improve, to be able to give the panel an impression that you are aware of that and you will work on that and improve yourself. Some other questions which are really important, you have to make yourself aware of what Medicare system is, what PBS system is, which is Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme, Work Cover, and TAC, which is Transport Accident Commission. So a Medicare system is a governmental organization that covers Australian citizens and Australian permanent residents for their healthcare. It doesn't cover cosmetic purposes or surgeries, but it covers otherwise. The pharmaceutical benefit scheme is something like Medicare. It is a governmental organization that covers part of the cost of medications for Australian citizens and Australian permanent residents as well. Work cover, it covers people who are having injuries during the practice of their job. So, for example, if you work as a doctor in a hospital and during your job you got hit by a patient trolley and you broke your leg, this injury is work-related injury and you will be treated under work cover. So it has to be a work-related injury. It doesn't apply for any other injuries. Transport Accident Commission cover for any injuries that happen on the road. So whether you are the passenger in the car, whether you are a pedestrian or a motor vehicle accident victim, you will be covered by the Transport Accident Commission. Another question that you might get asked, do you think if there is any difference between general practice in Australia and in your country? So you should acknowledge some differences. For example, some countries are based on written hard copies of medical records. However, here in Australia, we are based on soft copies of medical records. And you can then, according to where you're coming from and according to the differences, can point out what differences you think. Another question is, have you been to the clinic that you are going to work in? Do you know what facilities and services the clinic provide to the community? You should have gone to the clinic at least once. You know the facilities, if there is a psychologist, if there is an optometrist, if there is any other specialities other than general practice in the clinic, it's important to mention that as well. It is important to familiarize yourself with where you're going to start your job, and this helps with your orientation as well. Another question might be, are you aware of the 5 domains of general practice? So the 5 domains of the general practice are usually where we base our practice on as general practitioners. So the first one in the domains are communication and doctor-patient relationship. The second one is applied professional knowledge and skills. Third one is population health and the context of general practice. Fourth one, ethics and professional responsibilities. Number 5 is organizational and legal dimensions. You can find more about this on the Royal College of General Practitioners website. This will give you more information on the domains of general practice. I hope I covered most questions that you might get asked in the interview, and we'll now discuss few cases.